rising, Alex. Power's rising. Well, only put the turbine in.
It's criminal, and it's got to stop, and you have got to stop it.
So we need to discuss the evacuation.
There will be no evacuation.
Nobody told them. Nobody. We can no longer pretend.
Some found him, identified him as Valery Alexeyevich Legasov, some big shot scientist. Been dead about 4 hours.
My name is Valery Legasov, and 2 years ago, I'd never believed that my life would end like this. I used to think of this country as a new civilization. I think we all did. It was like a dream we shared. But 2 years ago, we were woken from that dream by an accident. An unprecedented accident. I headed the investigation into what caused the explosion. Compiled endless notes and testimonies. And later, I had the chance to present this evidence to the world. I didn't lie. But I didn't tell the whole truth. Now I want to go back to that night when what should have been a straightforward test on the reactor led to unimaginable tragedy. I need to relive the desperate days that followed. I need to reveal why the world really came to know the name Chernobyl.
So just like that, we should wait. How dare you? Sorry, sir, I'm not prepared to remove control rod while the reactor is this unstable.
How dare you?
Do it.
Sir, I don't think that it...
Do it now, I am ordering you.
Yes, sir. Protocol states that when the power has dropped like this, we shouldn't try...
50%. I'm not about to delay this test again because of a couple of insubordinate teenagers. You will do it now, or I will have you fired on the place.
Yes, sir, we don't think...
I will remove you from this station unless you increase power at once. Now remove the rods.
Reduce reactivity reserve, yes, that's right. Menopause.
Rods controlling the reactor are removed in preparation for the test. Of course, at this time in the Soviet Union, any information about the risks of nuclear power was classified. As far as these men know, Soviet reactors are flawless. Nothing ever goes wrong. Nothing can go wrong. Of course, some of us know different. Some of us know that there have been accidents, and for some years we've harboured silent fears of something big. But in all that time we've never really dared consider what we really meant by big. And we were about to find out.
The only reason I'm so bad at it is it's such a stupid pastime. Just sitting there all day on a bank, you know, it's not like a big deal.
It's a highly delicate duel between man and fish.
Turn it off.
Oh, separated steam pressure's dropping.
Well, turn it on. Switch off that whole safety relay or it'll shut us down halfway through the test.
Luba's met Sasha's new teacher. Yeah, he says he's taught 10-year-olds at his previous school.
Shut up. Is it too much to ask to get this done, all of you? Bunch of military crap. Let me know when the output's up.
Output 700 and critical, sir.
Happy, Mr. Akimov?
Very happy, sir. I just thought it might
At last. Well, get this out of the way. Shut down turbine 8.
Put down number 8, please. Get down turbine 8.
Power's rising, Alex. Power's rising.
You only put the turbine in. How's that? It was stable just now.
Come on, we've had this. Let's stop it.
Shut down the reactor. The controls back in. AZ, sir. I'm shutting down the reactor.
Well, there goes the test. How am I supposed to explain that?
I'm sorry, sir. It wasn't worth it. The power was climbing. I didn't know exactly how it was coming. What was that?
What happened? Somebody tell me what happened.
Control rods haven't gone in. The rods haven't gone in.
Let them drop in.
I am doing. I just don't know why they didn't go in the first place. I pressed the AZ button. They should have gone in.
Maybe.
Right, this is an emergency. Cool down the reactor immediately. Increase the water supply. Cool it down.
There's the steam valves on 27. If they're not open, get them open now.
It says there's no water at all in the reactor.
Oh, the turbine door's on fire.
What?
No, what are you doing? This is my control.
All right, Piotr! Go and check that the primary pumps are shifting water, letting you through the fire brigade. Right, Alex, get down to the reactor and lower the rods by hand, all of them. Call on that, you've got to shut it down
I am in charge here. I am in charge. What did you do, Akimov? What did you do?
Nothing, son. I don't understand it. I pressed the AZ button, it didn't shut it down.
The power surged.
The power surged!
That doesn't make any sense.
Maybe it's sabotage. Maybe we're at war. There could be nothing. Low levels from the water, but just wait. Best stay away from the turbine hole.
Yes.
Kolya, it's Yuri. I've just called Brukhanov.
Oh, no.
I had to.
Why? For heaven's sake, why?
The entire roof's been blown off. The fire brigade are
Just
here.
please,
Turbine-
don't call anyone you don't need to. Okay. Brukhanov knows. Look, we'll be all right. He'll see that when he gets it. Just more water. Keep the reactor cool. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. Who did you send to the reactor?
Just the reactor.
A nuclear reactor like the one at Chernobyl contains about 20 times the nuclear material of an atomic bomb and many thousands of tons of highly radioactive graphite. If it's damaged severely enough, all this radiation will escape. It'll travel through almost anything. Drift with the wind. Odorless. Indiscriminate. And it takes life in silence.
It can't be. Where's the reactor, Ellie? It's there. Find me on the roof. We better get out of here. The reactor's gone. The roof's been blown off. It's everywhere. It's in the reactor. It's gone. The reactor's...
Listen. You've got that wrong. The reactor is fine. You have got to be wrong. You've got to be wrong.
Rather faces, sir. The water pipes have been destroyed. There's water everywhere. Dust. It's just...
No way, no. Now listen, Brukhanov's going to be here soon. I need to tell him that we are cooling that reactor. Now you two go to the infirmary. Babachev's team are here, so you two go home. I got to meet Brukhanov.
Severe exposure to radiation begins a decline that is untreatable and atrocious. After initial dizziness and vomiting, sensitive tissues like the tongue begin to swell. Skin blackens, detaches itself. The cells of your body begin to break down. But your DNA is also grotesquely transformed so that in the days following exposure, you're gradually robbed not just of your life, but of the very thing that makes you the human being you are. It's a dreadful journey, which more and more unwitting bodies began that night. But just as the flesh can tolerate only so much radiation, it seems the mind can only absorb so much horror before it closes up to protect itself. Perhaps that's logic. Perhaps when the threat exceeds imagination, we conclude that the threat simply cannot be true.
We can't go. We can't leave. We can't. You and me especially. You and me especially. Yeah. Right, well, something's stopping water getting into the reactor. You must be in one of the gate valves. I'll have to open them by hand.
Viktor Brukhanov is the man who built and ran the Chernobyl plant. He was highly respected by his superiors and in line for high honors.
Beside the damage, the radiation... Well, the only equipment we have to measure it are the control room Geiger counters, and they're reading 3.6 rentgen per hour.
Well, that's not that bad, is it? I mean, 3.6. It's nothing.
Nothing, yes. But the scale only goes up to 3.6, and it's off that scale.
But it could be 3.6. It could be 3.6.
Yes, it could be 3.6.
Zakov, I have no intention of telling Moscow it's worse than it is, okay? If it says it's 3.6, it is 3.6. Nikolai, come here.
Despite the evidence, the blinding belief was taking hold of the workers at the plant that the reactor must be saved, that flooding it with water was essential. This effort, this sacrifice, was in fact futile.
Bring him in here. I want you to take readings in the building. Inside, around, everywhere. Then you get back here and report to us only.
Men are falling ill.
Kiev are sending 3,000 troops to secure the area. Moscow has appointed a government commission to investigate. Standard procedure, Nick. Nothing I can do about it. First experts get here this afternoon, the rest later tonight. Boris Sherbina will be in charge. He's deputy chairman of the Council of Ministers. I've not met him, but I've certainly met his expert advisor, Valery Legasov at the Kurchatov Institute. Party zealot. He has a lot of friends.
So the roof's destroyed, but there's no damage to the reactor? This is where I come in.
Well, none at all.
I'm to make a brief visit to the plant to get to the bottom of what's happened.
Thanks.
It'd be a lie to say I didn't feel a jolt of excitement. Pride, even. Yes, there's been a massive explosion, the biggest ever in a nuclear plant, but fatalities are low. As far as we've been told, our technologies and our personnel have coped with the crisis well. Everything is under control.
The reactor is destroyed. It is destroyed. And the readings are not 3.6 rentigens, sir. They are 15,000. 15,000.
No! This is impossible! Don't listen to this, sir. The equipment is wrong.
Tulia, you must be wrong. I've told Moscow.
Throw it in the bin.
There's nothing wrong with the equipment, and I feel extremely ill.
Throw it in the bin, you cretin! Get out! Get out! Imbecile! Idiot!
This is impossible.
Sir, I wanted to ask about evacuating Pripyat. Yes, the employees' town next
What
to...
are you talking about? What's the matter with you? You do no such thing. Do not speak of that again. Wait. You gave the readings to be 3.6. Are we now to assume you do not have the situation under control?
Oh, no, we do. I do. Radiation is within normal limits.
I can't do this anymore. Oh, my tongue is so swollen. My head. It's been hours. I think something really bad has happened, Alex. It can't just be here. It must be escaping. It must be everywhere. It must be everywhere. Where's she, my wife? I want to see my wife!
morning of the 26th of April was as warm and beautiful as anyone could remember. Yet, before dawn, the fresh, clear air had already been transformed. Now nothing was harmless. Dust, hair, clothes, the water supply, crops, livestock, the food they make, the milk they make, poison. On the evidence, I simply can't believe that the men in charge didn't know this. Yet not one warning was given. Not one precautionary action taken. Why did they not act? Important men were beginning to arrive from Moscow.
Comrade, Mayor,
they still seem to cling to the hope that if they ignored the truth, it might simply drift away and take the radiation and the blame with it.
What have they done to you, Alex? Fine. Go home, you have to go. Go. They're not allowing people to go in. I can't. I can't come in. Say, will you go? Get the kids home. And keep the window closed, Luba. Keep the window closed.
They can't cope. It's ridiculous. They'll have to send us to Kiev or Moscow.
Boris, how are you?
I've spoken to Minister Mayoretz. He'll be in charge till I get there.
Well, we've little more to go on. Viktor Brukhanov, the director of the plant, has reconfirmed that radiation doesn't exceed 3.6 rentgens per hour. Got to say, we're a little surprised by that, but if true, that's very good news.
So I don't need to worry?
Can if you want to, Boris. I wouldn't until it gets much higher.
A thorough inspection of the reactor building was immediately instigated. Our skilled technical staff confirmed a degree of damage to the structure of Unit 4. Fire did cause some minor damage to the roof of the turbine hall, but it was quickly extinguished by our highly trained fire crews. And since this morning, water has been fed to the reactor in order to cool it, according to... I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sir, this is Prushinsky, Chief Engineer of the State Committee.
The situation is a lot more grave.
Comrade Brukhanov has not finished his report yet.
So the concrete cap on the reactor that weighs about 1,000 tons has been blown to one side by the explosion, and it's now like a massive, half-closed eyelid from above. Now, the wind direction at the moment is up towards
what's behind this eyelid?
I'm sorry?
What's behind the eyelid? The core, sir. The exposed nuclear reactor core.
And it's burning, sir. It's on fire.
Sir, we need to evacuate the town at once. Close down the... Comrade Trebina will be here soon, and when he arrives... What is the reading here in town?
Well, even at that height, it's 10,000 rentgens. I don't know where this 3.6 figure came from, but
the readings were below. So we need to evacuate the town at once and shut down the remaining reactor. Glasnost nonsense. Evacuating the town will cause panic. People are already leaving because of rumour alone. No. No, and bad off. Your troops will not wear their masks and protective clothing. It will cause suspicion. And anyway, we haven't got enough to go round.
A rumour was spreading, which some believed, but most did not. Safe in the knowledge that they would be told of any threat, 35,000 people spent a sunny Saturday afternoon surrounded by levels of radiation 400 times the accepted norm. And still no warning was given. No action taken. Still no iodine given to the 17,000 children whose thyroid glands are now absorbing radiation like a sponge absorbs water. This is no longer the denial of the guilty. Their delusion is falling away with their blistered skin. No, this is the men above them. They are now the blind ones. To them, the truth is a greater threat than the invisible murderer that they know is on the loose.
There's 4 reactors here, of course, 4 units, all identical. The 5th one should be finished this year, and there's another one planned, so in 3 years, this will be the largest plant in the world. This is the 4th one that's coming in now. This one? Just to the left of the red and white chimney. Don't see it. It's the reactor. We're looking into the reactor. We have to move. We have to go. Move us away. Go.
Sir, you've been over the unit?
Comrade Legasov and I, somewhat distressed, Valery.
Then you've seen it.
Each man will have his chance to present his report to the Commission.
Sir, we need to discuss the evacuation.
There will be no evacuation.
We discussed radiation. There's every chance.
Panic is worse than radiation. Are we in here?
Finally, as our friends in the KGB can confirm, nothing has been reported overseas and nothing in Kiev. Moving on to the reactor. Deputy Minister of Energy Shasharin ordered an inspection.
It's completely destroyed.
Ordered an inspection and can confirm that it is in fact damaged. But we suggest that it be left to burn off.
Did anyone hear what Gennady just said? Look, being destroyed.
Comrade Legasov, you will have your chance to speak later.
I'm sorry, Boris, but it seems there's almost no one in this room who understands what this means. It's on fire. The graphite moderator, which in itself is just unbelievably radioactive, and what's left of the fuel core are on fire. Now, that's about 2,500 tons of carbon, which, burning at 1 ton an hour, will burn roughly for 3 months. And every day that it burns, it will send into the atmosphere more radiation than has ever been released in all the nuclear accidents that have ever happened anywhere in the world, all put together. Every day. For 3 months. You have my word that people that are asleep in their beds in this town tonight have effectively died today. As I speak, radiation is entering the bodies of everybody in this room. Everybody outside, hundreds of miles. We can no longer pretend. It's criminal. And it's got to stop, and you have got to stop it. I don't know how we can remedy the situation, but it's simply unacceptable to suggest we let it burn out.
Burn off.
Then we must quickly and quietly find a remedy and put it out.
Radiation doesn't penetrate lead. Why don't we drop lead from helicopters?
No, not lead. You've got to be careful with this thing. Here's the reactor, yeah? And it's separated from these chambers below by a floor made of concrete and steel. Now, these chambers are now flooded with just hundreds and thousands of gallons of water. Lead blocks drop from that height and simply punch a hole in this floor. The fuel and the gases reach the water and you get a simply massive, I mean massive, thermal explosion.
What extinguishes this sort of thing?
We've never had this sort of thing, so we don't really know.
We know water won't put it out.
It's only possible one is sand. Might have an effect. Maybe add some boron to absorb the neutrons.
And sand would smother it?
Might.
Maybe add some dolomite?
There's a risk to this, because, I mean, although the sand might smother the radiation, it could also act like a furnace, and you're just going to heat up the fire.
So what? The radiation will be stopped.
No, but it'll just burn through the floor towards the water.
And then we'd be back with a thermal explosion again. What is your advice, gentlemen?
Sand. Well, we're going to have to watch the temperature like a hawk.
Helicopters, hundreds of them.
Notify the Air Force.
Boris, what about the local population? What about Pripyat?
First thing in the morning, evacuate.
So, the people of Pripyat will end the day in the homes of strangers. Of course, so will the radioactive dust on their hair, their clothes, their bodies, on the wheels of their buses. To limit panic and baggage, they're being told it's just for 3 days, but of course we know better. We don't know if dropping sand will smother the fire, but even if it does, we know that these people will never see their homes again. What they're not carrying with them will be lost forever, frozen by radiation. Even their pets must stay and face a new life as wild animals, with nothing to feed on but each other.
My God. I estimate we'll need to drop about 5,000 tons. The riverbanks here are almost pure sand.
Seems we have no other hope.
So the gamble began. It would either save, or within days, annihilate us.
Turn off the ventilation, Nikolai. Don't get any more of that air in there.
At my asking, men were flying into a greater updraft of radiation than the Earth had ever known.
You're doing fine, Nikolai.
And I knew that it might all be for nothing.
Come back! Stop!
I didn't share my doubts with the others, and they didn't ask.
times and we can go. Next one up. Stand by Alpha 256.
Thousands of sand runs lay ahead. So too did the investigation into what or who had caused this catastrophe.
How much is a lethal dose?
400? 400 rads, a bit less.
What did you get?
650.
No, mine. Less than that.
No one's told me.
I got 1,500.
Show off.
The control room instruments are frozen. They began the test with only 18 control rods in the reactor.
18?
Yeah.
What the hell are they playing at?
What the hell happened? I pressed the AZ. Should have closed it down, but instead it was like a power surge. I hit the right button.
They're insisting that the AZ button was pressed by the shift leader, Alex Akimov. But if that's the case, then all the rods should be down in the reactor, and they're not.
None of the rods are in at all.
Just the tips.
Oh, shit. Ignalina.
Do you think this lot knew about Ignalina?
No, they couldn't have done. It's classified, we didn't tell them.
The AZ button causes the control rods to drop into the reactor and shut it down. Now, the operators are saying they pressed it, but the explosion happened several seconds afterwards.
They will say anything. We will have to conduct careful interviews.
Well, it might make sense. You see, the control rods are made of boron. But they're tipped with graphite. Now, in '83 at Ignalina, on a similar reactor, we found that in certain circumstances, when the graphite enters the water, it causes a power surge. A power surge. It doesn't immediately shut down the reactor. Now, I'm not saying this is all that happened here. I mean, whatever those boys were doing in the control...
Is your sand working, Valerie?
We don't know. We'll find out tomorrow.
These reactors have been around for years, years. If there's a problem...
It exploded when you hit the AZ button. Why didn't it stop the reaction? You say there couldn't be a design fault, but how else do you explain it?
They'd know. And if they knew, they'd tell us. The protocol would say.
Maybe.
Do you think we'll get the blame for this? You and me?
Yeah, I do.
My world... everything's... changing. Everything's upside down. The town's now wasteland. What was once comforting is now deadly. My idea to save the situation could be pushing us all towards apocalypse. And even the question of blame for this catastrophe is becoming very unclear to me.
You knew that the instruments only went up to 3.6.
Valerie.
You knew there was absolutely no way they could give you a true sense of the levels.
Valerie.
I was to be decorated this year, honoured, with my picture on the wall. I couldn't just throw that away. And I wanted to believe it could all be salvaged. Truly.
You should never be forgiven, Victor. But you might not be the only reason we're here. What I suspect is true. There isn't an innocent man in the building. I think this is going to catch up with us all.
Hello? Boris, we've got the temperature readings through from mechanical boys.
We have our own problems, Valerie. The Swedish have just reported radiation in their atmosphere.
Fire temperature is not falling. I can promise you that's far more concerned with the Soviet people than anything the Swedes can throw up. You remember the furnace effect on the floor beneath the reactor? Well, as far as we can work out, the fire's already burned halfway through this floor towards the water. When the temperature reaches 2,900 degrees, the uranium dioxide will melt and either burn or run its way through to hit the water.
The thermal explosion.
It would be
enormous.
Far greater than anything we've seen. It will level 200 square kilometres. It will also totally vaporise the fuel in the other 3 reactors. Most of Kiev would perish, and the Dnieper and Pripyat rivers, which supply, 30 million people with water, massively irradiated.
Northern Ukraine and most of Belarusia would be uninhabitable for anything up to a century.
This must not go beyond this room. Tell Viedov to keep monitoring it, and Negasov, I want a plan.
Find a couple of wetsuits, as thick as possible. Just keep them on standby until we need them. I am a committed communist, but as the days unfold at Chernobyl, I begin to see a face of the Soviet people that even I had stopped dreaming of. There's no fuss, no waste. A further 116,000 people are evacuated, a decision that would have taken months, taken in minutes. After years of stagnation and self-serving bureaucracy, there's now only passion and an almost brutal decisiveness. In the committee, we start using the phrase counting lives when A suggested task comes with a figure of how many men might be lost getting it done. The responsibility not to make mistakes, not to waste life is a terrible privilege.
Ready? Radiation's up. 2 million curies yesterday, 4 million today.
Shit! What does this mean?
It means it's getting hotter. A lot hotter.
We're heading for meltdown.
Unless we can clear the water from beneath the reactor, the explosion we were talking about is inevitable.
What options do we have?
Well, we have to count lives. The firemen again, to pump out the vents in the basement area. We also need to open these gate valves in the bubbler pool. The problem is they're underwater. Highly radioactive water. I've ordered some thick wetsuits, but we need a couple of volunteers to swim down and open them by hand.
We've seen so many walking dead and sent so many to their deaths, but never with such certainty. We tell them the truth, and they trust us. Is this task essential? Then there's nothing more to say.
They've entered the building. Confirming the dive team is inside Unit 4.
I don't believe there are even a handful of nations in this world that could still produce such unquestioned sacrifice. So 1941 all over again, when the Soviet heart was exposed to the Nazi invasion. It's the same lack of readiness, same desperation, but the same courage.
Yes to that. Confirm that water has cleared the lower chambers. There is no immediate threat of thermal explosion. Repeat, no immediate threat of thermal explosion.
We triumphed, and 1 million lives were saved. But I could already see what lay ahead. Years of clear-up, of investigation, and of blame.
Don't hug him, don't kiss him, and don't touch him.
I got out of bed yesterday, and the skin on my leg slipped down to my ankle like a loose sock. The roof of my mouth. I'm done for, Luba. I'm so sorry. Everything hurts so much. feel this guilt. It's worse than the pain.
14 days after the explosion, the first radiation victims, the men from the control room, begin to die. Many see this as a kind of justice. But the truth is more dreadful than that. They are no different from the men who saved us. But instead of telling them the risks, the truth about the rods, the reactor, we systematically withheld it. And with all their Soviet hearts, they trusted us. Convince a man he can fly, and disaster is inevitable.
Mr. Legasov, the work you have done is a credit to you and your institute. And your report, and the way you reached your conclusions, are of the highest order. The highest. But you will not read this to the international community in Vienna. You simply will not. Now, the Politburo have appointed you to present the report, so there is nothing that I can do to prevent you going.
Sir, I'm a scientist. I don't believe we can continue...
You are not a scientist. You are a politician. Soon you realize that. Tomorrow, the Politburo will publish their judgment that the operators perpetrated a series of crude violations. And you propose to contradict the Politburo?
They disobeyed the rules, but they weren't aware of the facts.
The potential neutron surge as the graphite tips re-entered was a known problem.
No, by whom? Nobody told them. Nobody. We told them there'd never been a major accident in a nuclear plant. Well, there's been 14. 14. And there'll be more, unless we change the way we communicate.
If they'd followed the rules are enough. You know the saying, you don't need a god to make an earthenware pot.
The secrecy is over. Chernobyl's changed all that. I love my country, but we have no choice.
Your report will be examined and rewritten by a committee of our own physicists. They will remove any reference to known flaws in the reactor design, the tips of the rods, etc. They will make more clear the shortcomings of the control room staff. And you will present that report in Vienna this August. Be careful, Valeri. Chernobyl can't change everything. Glasnost may be upon us, but it's not without enemies. There will be victims on both sides. See you around.
I did not speak out. I sat before the world in Vienna and blamed those young men at the controls. I made no mention of the role I'd played in their ignorance. I've tried to speak out since, to topple the myth that I helped create, but the papers I write, interviews I give, are not published. I've done nothing but damage my career and my standing. It's now 2 years to the day since the accident, and I have nothing.
I think it's just.
Valery Legasov's suicide caused shockwaves throughout the Soviet nuclear industry. After his death, design flaws in the graphite tips of Chernobyl-type RBMK reactors were finally admitted to, and changes hurriedly made. Despite this, Alexander Akimov and his colleague Leonid Toptunov have never been publicly exonerated. Many still believe they were largely responsible for the explosion. Power station director Viktor Brukhanov was sentenced to 10 years in prison, as was deputy chief engineer Anatoly Syatlov. Both were released early due to ill health. Once the fire died, investigators found that the fuel did in fact melt down to the chambers below. Had these not been drained of water, the thermal explosion would have taken place. This solidified fuel that cannot be moved will remain radioactive for at least 100,000 years. Official figures place the total death toll at just 31 people, all of them firemen and workers from the power station. The true figure, although impossible to calculate exactly, is very much higher. The radiation cloud contaminated millions of square kilometers. In neighboring Belarus, incidence of tumors rose to 50 times that of the United Kingdom, and 2,000 children from the surrounding area contracted thyroid cancer. A UN report estimated that by 2002, 8,000 people had already died, and within 10 years, that figure will have doubled. The victims of Chernobyl are victims of secrecy and denial. Almost 3 weeks after the explosion, President Gorbachev made an unprecedented public confession. But even he failed to acknowledge the role secrecy had played in the disaster. Just as Valery Legasov had maintained, some secrets can bring only catastrophe.
That's Surviving Disaster, back in 2 weeks' time here on BBC One.